Europe has had this problem for about 90 years. They stopped innovating about well, maybe France stopped innovating. I know there are a lot of French people here, so my apologies if I don't get this exactly right, but I think the last big innovations in France were over with around 1940. When you look at the 1950s and 1960s in France, all the big names and innovators were people who did their work in the 20s and 30s. In Sweden, for example, of the 20 largest companies, all 20 were around in the early 1920s. Isn't that amazing? It tells you, with one number, that tells you that there's been no dynamism in Sweden for decades and decades and decades. Now, the United States is the exception. It's been historically the country that has managed to maintain its dynamism. But I worry now, I think in the past decade, as I was saying before, I think there's all sorts of circumstantial evidence and some direct evidence to suggest that the tendency to innovate, dynamism, has declined enormously. The innovation process is a chain. It starts with a new idea, and then there's the entrepreneur willing to develop it, or not willing, well, willing to develop it, and then it requires a financier willing to finance it, and then once it's developed, it requires a marketing person, and then, you know, it's not an innovation unless it's adopted. So it requires consumers who are venturesome enough, to use an Amar Bideh word, he's somewhere in the audience, who are venturesome enough to make the pioneering adoptions. In some countries, one link in the chain is the weak one. It seems to me that in the U.S. economy, and I could be wrong, but I think that in the U.S. economy, the weak link has been in finance. Finance has had a very pernicious effect on the business sector. It's encouraged short-termism. It's encouraged CEOs to focus obsessively on hitting their earnings targets for the next quarter, and never mind innovative ideas that might revolutionize the company 5 or 10 years from now.